Join Marple the Clue Crafter for Miss Marple's brilliant mystery solutions.
In the snowbound shadows of Mead Manor, a scream pierces the night. Sir Reginald Ashford lies dead, a letter opener in his heart. His priceless manuscript vanished. Who among the elegant guests harbors a deadly secret? Was it the dashing war hero, the grieving widow, or the cunning scholar? As the storm traps them all, Miss Jane Marple and Hercule Poirot unravel a web of lies, love, and betrayal. Will a single clue, a thread, a smudge, a hidden page reveal the killer before the snow clears? Step into a mystery where every glance hides a truth, and every truth hides a killer. Chapter 1. The Snowbound Manor. The snow fell in thick, silent sheets over the village of St. Mary Mead, cloaking the world in a hush that seemed to muffle even the usual chatter of its inhabitants. By late afternoon, on December 22nd, 1928, the roads to Mead Manor, perched on the hill above the village, were impassable. The manor, a sprawling Georgian pile with ivy-clad walls and tall chimneys, stood isolated, its windows glowing like amber eyes against the gathering dusk. Inside, the guests of Sir Reginald Ashford's Christmas house party gathered in the drawing room, their laughter and clinking glasses a brittle counterpoint to the storm outside. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly in a high-backed chair near the fire, her knitting needles clicking with a steady rhythm. To the casual observer, she was merely a frail, elderly spinster, her white hair tucked neatly beneath a lace cap, her blue eyes mild behind spectacles. But those who knew her understood that Miss Marple missed nothing. Her companion for the evening, her nephew Raymond West, had persuaded her to accept Sir Reginald's invitation, insisting that a change from her cottage would do her good. Raymond, a writer with a penchant for modern ideas, lounged nearby, his lanky frame sprawled across a velvet settee as he observed the room with a novelist's curiosity. The guests were an eclectic assembly, drawn together by Sir Reginald's reputation as a collector of rare manuscripts and his penchant for lavish hospitality. Sir Reginald himself, a portly man in his 60s with a florid face and a booming voice, held court near the grand piano, regaling his audience with tales of his latest acquisition, a medieval manuscript said to contain coded secrets. His wife, Lady Eleanor, a delicate woman with haunted eyes, drifted among the guests. Her smile, passion for genealogy, completed the party, her pince-nez glinting as she recounted obscure family histories to anyone who would listen. Miss Marple's needles paused as she noted the undercurrents in the room. Lady Eleanor's hand trembled as she poured sherry. Captain Drummond's laughter was too loud, his eyes darting to Celia with a hunger that bordered on desperation. Dr. Langley's fingers twitched as if longing for a cigarette, while his wife's barbed remarks drew winces from the group. Victor Crane's gaze lingered on Sir Reginald's manuscript, displayed on a velvet cushion under glass, with an intensity that suggested more than professional interest. Even Miss Henshaw, for all her prattle, seemed to watch the others with a calculating air. "Really, Aunt Jane," Raymond murmured, leaning closer. "You look as if you're solving a puzzle already. It's just a house party." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a faint smile. "My dear Raymond, people are always puzzles, and in a house like this, with snow to keep us all penned in, puzzles have a way of becoming complicated." Her words were prophetic. At precisely 8:47 p.m., as the grandfather clock in the hall chimed, a scream shattered the polite hum of conversation. It came from the library, a room adjacent to the drawing room, where Sir Reginald had retired to show his manuscript to Victor Crane. The guests froze, glasses suspended mid-sip. Raymond sprang to his feet, followed by Captain Drummond and Dr. Langley. Miss Marple, with surprising agility for her age, tucked her knitting into her bag and followed at a measured pace. The library door stood ajar, revealing a scene of chaos. Sir Reginald lay slumped over his desk, a letter opener protruding from his chest. Blood stained his white shirt front, pooling onto the blotter. The manuscript case was open, its precious contents gone. Victor Crane stood frozen near the window, his face pale, his hands raised as if to ward off an unseen threat. Lady Eleanor, who had screamed, swayed in the doorway, supported by Celia. "Good heavens!" Raymond exclaimed, his voice shaking. "He's dead!" Dr. Langley knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse. "Stabbed through the heart," he said grimly. "He's been dead no more than 10 minutes. Captain Drummond strode to the window, which was slightly open, letting in a swirl of snow. "The thief must have escaped this way," he declared, pointing to a faint trail of footprints leading into the garden. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the room. The fire crackled in the grate, casting shadows on the oak-panelled walls. A single candlestick lay overturned on the desk, its wax pooling beside the blood. A half-empty glass of brandy stood untouched, its amber surface undisturbed. The footprints in the snow were clear, but oddly uneven. Victor Crane, who was now muttering about having seen nothing unusual, his leather notebook lay open on a side table, its pages filled with cryptic shorthand. Lady Eleanor's sobs grew louder, and Celia led her mother away, casting a frightened glance at the body. Mrs. Langley hovered near the door, her face a mask of shock, though her eyes darted to her husband with a peculiar intensity. Miss Henshaw clutched her handkerchief, muttering about the Ashford family curse, a tale she had recounted earlier with relish. Raymond turned to Miss Marple, his face pale. "Aunt Jane, this is dreadful. Who could have done such a thing?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled with a quiet intensity. "That, my dear Raymond, is what we must discover. But first we must ensure no one leaves this house. The snow, you see, is both our captor and our ally. It will preserve the truth, if we know where to look." The butler, a stoic man named Parsons, was summoned to lock the doors and windows. The local constable, trapped in the village by the storm, would not arrive until morning at the earliest. The guests retreated to the drawing room, their faces a mixture of fear and suspicion. Miss Marple resumed her seat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking once more, but her mind was far from idle. She observed the way Captain Drummond's hand lingered on Celia's arm, the way Dr. Langley avoided his wife's gaze, the way Victor Crane's fingers twitched toward his notebook. "Raymond," she said softly, "fetch me the guest list and the times everyone was in the drawing room before the scream. And note, if you please, who left the room and when." Raymond nodded, accustomed to his aunt's methodical ways. As he moved to comply, Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the window, where the snow continued to fall, obliterating the footprints outside. But in her mind, the clues were already taking shape, small, precise, and undeniable. The puzzle of Dane Mead Manor had begun, and Miss Jane Marple was determined to solve it. Word count 1980. Chapter 2. The Crime. The drawing room at Dane Mead Manor, so recently a stage for polite conversation and clinking glasses, now bore the oppressive air of a tribunal. The snowstorm raged outside, sealing the manor as effectively as a locked vault. The guests sat in uneasy clusters, their faces drawn, their eyes darting to one another with suspicion. Sir Reginald Ashford's body remained in the library, covered with a sheet at Dr. Langley's insistence, pending the arrival of the authorities. The grandfather clock ticked relentlessly, marking 9:15 p.m., less than half an hour since the scream that had shattered the evening. Miss Jane Marple sat in her corner, her knitting needles moving with their usual precision, though her attention was fixed on the room's occupants. Her nephew, Raymond West, hovered near her, clutching a hastily scribbled list of the guests' movements before they
replaced by a nervous energy that betrayed his shock.
"Aunt Jane," he whispered, "this is ghastly. A murder, right under our noses, and that manuscript gone." "Calm yourself, Raymond," Miss Marple replied softly, a voice as steady as her stitches. "Panic clouds the mind, and we shall need clarity tonight. Tell me, what does your list reveal?" Raymond glanced at the paper, his brow furrowing. "It's incomplete, I'm afraid. Parsons, the butler, helped me piece it together. But not everyone's movements are clear. At 8:30 p.m., most of us were in the drawing room. Sir Reginald was here until about 8:40, when he invited Mr. Crane to see the manuscript in the library. Lady Eleanor was pouring sherry. Celia was chatting with Captain Drummond, and Dr. Langley was by the fire. Mrs. Langley left the room briefly around 8:35. She said she needed her shawl from her room. Miss Henshaw was at the piano, playing something dreary, but she stopped around 8:45 just before the scream. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "And you, Raymond? Where were you?" "Me? Oh, I was here, talking to you about that novel I'm working on. You were knitting, as always." He paused, then added, "But I did step out to the hall for a moment, around 8:42, I think, to fetch my cigarette case from my coat." Miss Marple nodded, her expression unreadable. "Very well. And the scream came at 8:47, you say?" "Exactly. Lady Eleanor was the first to react. She ran towards the library, and we all followed." Miss Marple set her knitting aside and rose, her movements deliberate. "Let us return to the library, Raymond. There are details I wish to examine before the snow covers more than it should." The library was a sombre scene, lit by the flickering fire and a single electric lamp on the desk. Sir Reginald's body lay still, the sheet concealing the horror of the letter opener in his chest. The open window admitted a chill draught, and the snow had already begun to drift onto the sill, blurring the footprints outside. Miss Marple stepped carefully around the room, her eyes scanning every surface. The overturned candlestick caught her attention first. It lay at an odd angle, as if knocked over in haste, yet the wax had not spread far, suggesting it had been upright until recently. "Curious," she murmured, bending to inspect the desk. The blood had dried in a dark pool, but the brandy glass remained untouched, its surface smooth. She noted a faint smudge on the glass's rim, a trace of lipstick, perhaps, though Lady Eleanor, the only woman known to have been near the desk, wore none that evening. Raymond hovered behind her, his voice low. "What do you see, Aunt Jane?"
The footprints outside. They are deep at the edge of the sill, but grow shallow quickly. A man fleeing in haste would not pause to lighten his step, would he? Raymond peered out the window, squinting into the snow. "You're right. It's almost as if someone wanted us to think they escaped that way." "Precisely," Miss Marple said, her tone crisp. She turned to the manuscript case, now empty, its velvet lining slightly askew. A single thread, dark green and silken, clung to the hinge. She plucked it carefully and tucked it into her handkerchief. "And this," she said, "is not the sort of thread one finds on a thief's coat. It is too fine, too deliberate." Before Raymond could respond, Captain Drummond entered, his face grim. Miss Marple, Mr. West. The others are growing restless. Mrs. Langley is insisting we search the house for the manuscript, and Miss Henshaw keeps muttering about curses. It's all rather chaotic. Miss Marple inclined her head. Thank you, Captain. We shall join them shortly. But tell me, where were you at 8:47 when Lady Eleanor screamed? Drummond's jaw tightened. I was in the drawing room with Celia, Miss Ashford. We were discussing the weather. His eyes flicked away, and Miss Marple noted the slight flush on his cheeks. I see, she said mildly. And did you notice anyone else leave the room before the scream? Drummond hesitated. Mrs. Langley was still out, I think, and Mr. Crane had gone with Sir Reginald. I didn't notice anyone else. Miss Marple nodded, dismissing him with a polite smile. As he left, she turned to Raymond. Mark that, Raymond. The captain is protective of Miss Ashford, yet his alibi depends on her. And Mrs. Langley's absence is convenient. They returned to the drawing room, where the guests were indeed in disarray. Mrs. Langley stood by the fire, her voice sharp as she demanded a search. That manuscript is worth a fortune. Whoever took it is likely still in this house, laughing at us. Victor Crane, seated near the piano, clutched his notebook defensively. I was with Sir Reginald when it happened, he said, his voice trembling. I stepped to the window to admire the snow, and when I turned back, he was dead. I saw no one else. Lady Eleanor, pale and tearful, sat beside Celia, who clutched her mother's hand. Father was so proud of that manuscript, Celia whispered. Why would anyone kill him for it? Miss Henshaw, perched on an ottoman, adjusted her pince-nez. The Ashford family has long been plagued by tragedy. In 1783, Sir Reginald's great-uncle was murdered in this very house over a disputed inheritance. Perhaps the curse were red, but her posture was rigid, as if holding back a secret. Victor Crane's fingers tapped nervously on his notebook, and Miss Marple noted a faint ink stain on his cuff, a detail absent earlier. Raymond, she said quietly, ask Parsons to confirm the times each guest arrived at the manor today, and inquire about the staff. Were any of them near the library at 8:47? Raymond nodded and slipped away. Miss Marple resumed her knitting, her mind piecing together the fragments of the evening. The lipstick on the glass, the green thread, the uneven footprints, the untouched brandy, all were clues, small but significant. She recalled a similar case in St. Mary Mead, where a stolen brooch had revealed a thief's identity through a single careless thread. Human nature, she thought, was so predictable, yet so cunning. As the clock struck 10 p.m., Parsons returned with Raymond, confirming that no staff had been near the library at the time of the murder. The guests' arrival times were consistent, but one detail stood out. Mrs. Langley had arrived with a heavy trunk, which Parsons had carried to her room. It was locked tight, miss, he said to Miss Marple, and she was most particular about it. Miss Marple's needles paused. Thank you, Parsons. That will be all for now. As the butler withdrew, she leaned toward Raymond. A locked trunk, a missing manuscript, and a murder. The pieces are there, Raymond, but they do not yet fit. We must watch, and listen, and wait. The snow will keep our killer close, and human nature will betray them. The room fell silent, save for the howl of the wind outside. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. The puzzle of Dane Mead Manor was growing clearer, but the truth remained buried, like a clue in the snow. Chapter 3. The Arrival. The snow continued its relentless descent outside Dane Mead Manor, transforming the world into a silent white prison. Inside,
The atmosphere in the drawing room grew heavier, the guests' polite facades fraying under the weight of suspicion and fear. It was now 10:30 p.m. on December 22, 1928, and the reality of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder had settled over the house like a pall. The library remained sealed, its grim contents untouched, and the missing manuscript loomed large in everyone's thoughts. Miss Jane Marple, seated by the fire, appeared to knit with serene detachment, but her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. Raymond West, her nephew, paced near the window, his earlier shock giving way to a restless need to act. "Aunt Jane," he said in a low voice, "this is maddening. The constable can't possibly reach us until the snow lets up, and we're stuck here with a murderer. Surely we should do something. Search the rule."
Truth. "Tell me, have you spoken to Parsons about the household staff?" Raymond nodded, producing a small notebook. "Yes, I've checked. The butler, Parsons, was in the pantry polishing silver at 8:47 p.m. The cook, Mrs. Gibbs, was in the kitchen with the scullery maid preparing tomorrow's breakfast. The 2 footmen were in their quarters, and the housemaids were upstairs turning down beds. All accounted for, with no one near the library." "Very good," Miss Marple murmured, her gaze drifting to the guests. "And yet, someone was near enough to kill Sir Reginald and take his manuscript. The snow, you see, ensures that no one has left the manor. The answer lies here, among us." At that moment, the heavy oak door of the drawing room creaked open, and a new figure entered, brushing snow from his overcoat. The man was small, impeccably dressed, with a neat mustache and a bearing that suggested both confidence and curiosity. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. It was Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, whose reputation for solving impossible crimes had reached even the remote village of St. Mary Mead. "Good evening, mes amis," Poirot said, his voice calm and precise. "I regret my late arrival, but the snow, it is formidable. I am Hercule Poirot, invited by Sir Reginald Ashford to examine his remarkable manuscript. I understand, however, that a tragedy has occurred." Raymond stepped forward, his surprise evident. "Mr. Poirot, we weren't expecting you. Sir Reginald didn't mention." Poirot raised a hand, his green eyes twinkling. "Sir Reginald, he was most discreet. He wrote to me last week, expressing concern about the safety of his manuscript. He feared, perhaps, that it was not as secure as he wished. And now I arrive to find him dead and the manuscript gone. Most distressing." Miss Marple's needles paused, and she regarded Poirot with a faint smile. "Mr. Poirot, what an unexpected pleasure. I am Jane Marple of St. Mary Mead. I fear you have arrived at a most inopportune moment." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle Marple, your reputation precedes you. I have heard of your remarkable insight into human nature. Perhaps together we may unravel this sad affair." The guests stirred, some with relief, others with unease. Captain Drummond rose, his face stern. "Mr. Poirot, thank God you're here. Sir Reginald was murdered not 2 hours ago, stabbed in the library. The manuscript's been stolen, and the killer's likely still in this house." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Indeed? Then we have much to do. But first, I must see the scene of the crime. Monsieur West, will you accompany me? And Mademoiselle Marple, perhaps you would care to join us?" Miss Marple inclined her head. "I should be delighted, Mr. Poirot."
Agitated stride. Miss Marple followed, her eyes scanning the corridor for any overlooked detail, a scuff on the floor, a misplaced object. The library itself was as they had left it, the sheet over Sir Reginald's body a stark reminder of the evening's horror. Poirot surveyed the room with a methodical air, his hands clasped behind his back. He noted the overturned candlestick, the untouched brandy glass, and the empty manuscript case. "The letter opener," he said, pointing to the weapon still protruding from the sheet.
It is from the desk, no? A weapon of opportunity, perhaps. Miss Marple nodded. Indeed, Mr. Poirot. But note the smudge on the brandy glass, a trace of lipstick. Yet Lady Eleanor, who was closest to the desk, wears none. And the footprints in the snow, uneven as if staged. Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. You observe well, mademoiselle. The footprints, they are a distraction, I think. No one could escape far in this storm, and yet the manuscript is not here. It suggests the killer remains among us, hiding their prize. Raymond, hovering near the desk, pointed to the open window. But the footprints lead outside. Surely the thief fled that way. Poirot shook his head. No, Monsieur West. The snow, it falls too quickly. Those prints would be covered by now if they were made at 8:47. No, they were made earlier, perhaps to mislead. The killer wishes us to believe in an outsider. Miss Marple's gaze fell on the green thread she had tucked into her handkerchief. And this thread, Mr. Poirot, from the manuscript case. It is silk, finely woven, not the sort of thing one finds on a common thief's coat. Poirot examined the thread, his fingers delicate. Most interesting. It suggests someone of refinement, or someone who wishes to appear so. We must learn who in this house wears such a fabric. They returned to the drawing room, where the guests awaited with varying degrees of impatience. Poirot addressed them with a calm authority. Mesdames et messieurs, I am here to assist in this tragic matter. Sir Reginald's death is a crime of calculation, not passion. I shall require your cooperation. No one is to leave this house, and all rooms may be subject to search. For now, I ask that you recount your movements between 8:30 and 8:47 this evening. Mrs. Langley bristled. This is outrageous. Are we all suspects now? Poirot's smile was polite but firm. Madame, in a murder, everyone is a suspect until they are not. The truth, it will reveal itself, but only with order and method. Lady Eleanor, still pale, spoke softly. I was in the drawing room, pouring sherry.
With her the whole time? Dr. Langley cleared his throat. I was by the fire, reading. I didn't leave the room. Miss Henshaw adjusted her pince-nez. I was playing the piano until just before the scream. I saw Mrs. Langley return from fetching her shawl. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed. I was only gone a moment. My room is just upstairs. I returned before the scream. Victor Crane, clutching his notebook, spoke last. I was with Sir Reginald in the library. He was showing me the manuscript. I stepped to the window to look at the snow, and when I turned back, he was dead. I didn't touch anything. Poirot's gaze lingered on Crane, noting the ink stain on his cuff. Merci, everyone. Your accounts are most helpful. Now, I suggest you retire to your rooms, but do not leave the manor. Mademoiselle Marple and I shall confer. As the guests dispersed, Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot. Mr. Poirot, I believe we have a puzzle of motives here. Sir Reginald's manuscript was valuable, but so too were his secrets. The lipstick, the thread, the footprints, they all point to someone in this room. Poirot nodded. Indeed, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they are already at work. And with your insight into the human heart, we shall uncover the truth. Miss Marple smiled faintly. In St. Mary Mead, I have seen many such hearts. They hide, but they always betray themselves. The clock struck 11 p.m., and the manor settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the howl of the wind. The stage was set, and the investigation had begun. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The snowstorm showed no sign of abating as the clock in Dane Mead Manor's drawing room struck midnight,
casting a somber toll over the uneasy gathering. The guests had retired to their rooms, but sleep was elusive in a house shadowed by murder. Miss Jane Marple, however, remained alert, her knitting folded neatly in her lap as she sat with Hercule Poirot in a small parlour adjacent to the drawing room. Raymond West, her nephew, stood by the fire, his earlier agitation now tempered by a growing fascination with the unfolding mystery. Poirot, his small frame impeccable even at this late hour, sipped a tisane prepared by the butler Parsons. His green eyes gleamed with the intensity of a man who thrived on puzzles. "Mademoiselle Marple," he said, "we have a most intriguing tableau. A murder, a stolen manuscript, and a house full of secrets. But where to begin? The little grey cells, they demand order." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. "Indeed, Mr. Poirot, in my village of St. Mary Mead, I have found that the simplest questions often yield the most revealing answers. Let us start with the—"
"Killed Sir Reginald to get it." Poirot raised a finger. "No, Monsieur West. The manuscript, it is a motive, oui, but not the only one. The heart of this crime lies in the human passions, greed, love, revenge. We must question each guest methodically to uncover the contradictions." Miss Marple nodded. "And we must do so delicately. People guard their secrets, but they cannot hide their natures. Shall we begin, Mr. Poirot?" The detective inclined his head. "Oui, let us summon them one by one. Parsons, s'il vous plaît. Ask Lady Eleanor to join us first." The butler, ever stoic, fetched Lady Eleanor, who entered the parlour with a fragility that belied her composed exterior. Her pale face was drawn, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. Poirot gestured to a chair, his manner courteous but probing. "Lady Eleanor," he began, "my deepest sympathies. But we must understand the events of this evening. You were pouring sherry in the drawing-room at 8:40, when Sir Reginald left with Monsieur Crane. Did you see anything unusual before the scream at 8:47? Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered. "Nothing, Mr. Poirot. I was distracted. The guests were all so lively and I was trying to be a good hostess. I saw Reginald go to the library and then I heard my own scream when I found him." Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice gentle. "My dear, you were closest to the library door when you screamed. Did you notice anyone else nearby? A sound, perhaps, or a shadow?" Lady Eleanor hesitated, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. I thought I heard a rustle, like fabric, just before I entered. But it was so quick, I can't be sure. I was in such a state." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Merci, Lady Eleanor. And the manuscript. Did Sir Reginald ever speak of its value, or of anyone who coveted it?" She shook her head. "He was obsessed with it. Said it held secrets that could rewrite history. But he trusted everyone here, or so I thought." As Lady Eleanor withdrew, Poirot exchanged a glance with Miss Marple. "A rustle of fabric," he murmured. "Most interesting." Next came Celia Ashford, her youthful beauty marred by red-rimmed eyes. She sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap. Poirot's questions were direct but kind. "Mademoiselle, you were with Capitaine Drummond at the piano. Did you see anyone leave the drawing-room before the scream?" Celia's gaze faltered. "I was absorbed in our conversation. Captain Drummond was telling me about his time in the war. I didn't notice much else, but I think Mrs. Langley was still out when the scream came." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "My dear, you and Captain Drummond seem close. Was there anything troubling you this evening before the tragedy?" Celia's cheeks flushed. "Troubling? No, nothing. I was just—"
His eyes wary. "I was with Miss Ashford the whole time," he said firmly. "We didn't leave the drawing room. I heard the scream and ran to the library with the others." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, Capitaine, you were quick to suggest the thief escaped through the window. Why so certain?" Drummond shrugged. "It seemed obvious. The window was open, footprints leading out, stands to reason. Miss Marple's needles, which she had resumed, paused briefly. "Captain, you're a man of action. Did you notice anyone acting oddly before the scream? A glance, perhaps, or a hurried step?" Drummond's jaw tightened. "Can't say I did. Everyone was chatting, drinking, normal party stuff." Dr. Langley was next, his nervous habit of adjusting his tie more pronounced. "I was by the fire reading a medical journal," he said. "I didn't leave the room. My wife went to fetch her shawl, but she was back before the scream." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your wife, Doctor? She was gone for how long?" "5 minutes, perhaps," Langley replied, his voice clipped. "She's particular about her things." Mrs. Langley, when summoned, was defiant. "I went to my room for my shawl," she snapped. "I was back by 8:45. I heard the scream from the drawing room, like everyone else." Miss Marple's voice was mild. "Mrs. Langley, you brought a heavy trunk with you. Might I ask what it contained?" Mrs. Langley's eyes flashed. "Personal effects. Clothes, jewelry. Nothing to do with this." Victor Crane, the literary agent, entered, clutching his notebook, his face pale. "I've told you. I was with Sir Reginald," he said. "I looked out the window, heard a thud, turned and saw him dead. I didn't touch the manuscript." Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Crane, your notebook. You write in it constantly. What is so urgent that you must record during a house party?" Crane flushed. "Just notes for my work. Clients, deals, nothing relevant." Miss Marple noted the ink stain on his cuff, now more pronounced. "Mr. Crane, you admire fine manuscripts. Did Sir Reginald's interest you particularly?" "Of course," Crane admitted. "It was priceless, but I didn't kill him for it." Finally, Miss Clara Henshaw took her seat, her pince-nez glinting. "I was playing the piano," she said primly. "I stopped just before the scream. I saw Mrs. Langley return, and I noticed Mr. West step into the hall briefly." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And the manuscript, Mademoiselle Henshaw? Did you know of its history?" She nodded eagerly. "Oh, yes. It's said to—"
Poirot, the absences may be less significant than the presences. The lipstick on the glass, the green thread, the ink on Mr. Crane's cuff. They speak of carelessness, or perhaps intent. Raymond, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Aunt Jane, Mr. Poirot, what about the staff? Could one of them have slipped into the library?" Poirot shook his head. "No, monsieur. Parsons' account of the staff is consistent. The killer is among the guests. But we must verify. Mademoiselle Marple, what do you propose?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "I propose we observe them tomorrow at breakfast. People are less guarded in the morning, and I should like to see Mrs. Langley's trunk, if possible, discreetly, of course." Poirot smiled. "A plan most excellent. For now, let us rest. The little grey cells, they work best when refreshed." As they parted, Miss Marple lingered, her gaze on the snow outside. The manor was a closed circle, its secrets locked within. She thought of a similar case in St. Mary Mead, where a stolen letter had revealed a killer's motive through a single careless word. The clues here were mounting, and she was certain the truth was close, if only they could see it clearly. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The dawn of December 23rd, 1928, broke over Danemead Manor with a pale, cold light filtering through the snow-laden windows. The storm had eased slightly,
but the drifts remained impassable, sealing the house and its occupants in a frozen cocoon. In the dining room, the guests gathered for breakfast, their faces drawn from sleeplessness and suspicion. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, and the clink of silverware against porcelain sounded unnaturally loud. Miss Jane Marple sat at the far end of the table, her knitting bag at her side, her mild blue eyes observing the scene with quiet intensity. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a fresh suit, sipped his coffee, his moustache twitching as he surveyed the room. Raymond West, seated beside his aunt, scribbled notes in his notebook, his writer's curiosity undimmed by the grim circumstances. The breakfast was a subdued affair, served by the butler, Parsons, whose stoic demeanour belied the tension in the house. Lady Eleanor, pale and silent, picked at her toast, while Celia Ashford sat close to Captain Drummond, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Langley adjusted his tie repeatedly, his wife's sharp gaze fixed on him with barely concealed disdain. Victor Crane clutched his leather notebook, his fingers stained with ink, and Miss Clara Henshaw prattled about the Ashford family history, though her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. Poirot broke the silence.
This is absurd, Mr. Poirot. The footprints in the snow clearly show the killer escaped through the library window. Why are we being interrogated like criminals? Captain Drummond nodded vigorously. She's right. The thief came from outside, killed Sir Reginald, and fled with the manuscript. We're wasting time suspecting each other. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly as she spoke, her tone gentle but incisive. Captain Drummond, Mrs. Langley, you both seem certain of an outsider. Yet the snow falls heavily, and those footprints were too pristine, too deliberate. In my village of St. Mary Mead, I once knew a man who left footprints to mislead a pursuer. They led nowhere, much like these. Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. Precisely, Mademoiselle Marple. The footprints, they are a red herring, designed to distract. The killer is among us, and the manuscript, I suspect, remains in this house. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's hand trembled, spilling her tea, and Celia quickly steadied her mother's arm. Victor Crane's fingers tightened on his notebook, and Dr. Langley's face grew pale. Miss Henshaw adjusted her pince-nez, her lips pursed as if restraining a comment. Raymond leaned toward Miss Marple, whispering, "Aunt Jane, they're all so quick to point to the footprints, it's almost too convenient." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on Mrs. Langley. "Indeed, Raymond. Convenience in a murder case is rarely innocent. But let us watch and listen. The guilty often betray themselves by overconfidence." Poirot rose, his small frame commanding attention. "I propose we examine the library once more, with fresh eyes, and I should like to see the rooms of each guest, with your permission. The manuscript, it is too large to vanish entirely." Mrs. Langley bristled. "Search my room? That's an outrage. My trunk contains personal items, nothing more." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Madame, in a murder investigation, privacy must yield to truth. We shall be discreet." Reluctantly, the guests agreed, and Poirot, Miss Marple, and Raymond began their inspection. The library was as they had left it, the sheet over Sir Reginald's body untouched. Poirot knelt by the window, examining the sill. "The snow here is disturbed, but not as much as one would expect from a struggle. And the footprints outside, they stop abruptly, as if the person turned back." Miss Marple peered at the desk, her attention drawn to the overturned candlestick. "Mr. Poirot, this candlestick troubles me. It was knocked over, yet the wax pool is small, suggesting it fell just before the scream. But why knock it over at all, unless to create a scene of chaos?" stood in a corner. She stood by, her arms crossed, as Poirot examined it. "Madame, may we open it?" Mrs. Langley hesitated, then produced a key with a scowl. "There's nothing to find." The trunk revealed furs, dresses, and jewelry, but no manuscript. Miss Marple, however, noted a faint scent of ink emanating from a folded shawl, green silk, matching the thread from the manuscript case. "Most curious," she murmured, exchanging a glance with Poirot. Captain Drummond's room was next, filled with military memorabilia and a locked strongbox. He opened it reluctantly, revealing letters and medals, but nothing suspicious. Celia's room was tidy, with a photograph of her and Drummond tucked into a mirror frame. Lady Eleanor's room held only mourning clothes and a Bible, open to a passage about betrayal. Dr. Langley's room contained medical books and a vial of sedative, which he claimed was for his nerves. Victor Crane's room was cluttered with papers, his notebook filled with shorthand notes about rare books, including a cryptic reference to Ashford's Prize. Miss Henshaw's room was a shrine to genealogy, with charts tracing the Ashford lineage, but nothing obviously incriminating. As they returned to the parlor, Poirot's expression was thoughtful. "The manuscript is not yet found, but the clues? They multiply. The ink on Monsieur Crane's cuff, the green silk in Madame Langley's trunk, the photograph in Mademoiselle Ashford's room. These are threads in our tapestry." Miss Marple nodded. "And the alibis, Mr. Poirot? Mrs. Langley was absent for 5 minutes, Raymond for a moment. Mr. Crane was in the library but claims he saw nothing. Each story has a gap, a moment unaccounted for." Raymond, eager to contribute, said, "What about the staff? Could someone have slipped away unnoticed?" Poirot shook his head. "No, monsieur. Parsons' account is precise. The staff were occupied elsewhere. The killer is one of our guests, and the red herrings, the footprints, the open window are meant to mislead." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "In St. Mary Mead, I once knew a woman who left a glove at a crime scene to implicate another. It was too perfect, too obvious. These footprints are much the same. Someone wishes us to look outside, when the truth is inside." Poirot clapped his hands. "Exactement! We must now apply pressure. Tonight, at dinner, we shall observe their reactions. A guilty conscience, it cannot—" Silent, her eyes fixed on her plate. As the meal ended, Poirot rose. "Mes amis, tonight we are closer to the truth. The killer believes they have outwitted us, but they have not. The manuscript, it is hidden, but not far. Tomorrow we shall uncover more." The guests dispersed, their unease palpable. Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot. "Mr. Poirot, the red herrings are many, but the truth is simple. Someone in this house killed Sir Reginald, and they are growing careless. The green thread, the ink, the photograph, they are not accidents." Poirot nodded. "The little grey cells agree, mademoiselle. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net." As the clock struck 9 p.m., the manor settled into an uneasy quiet, the snow outside a silent witness to the secrets within. Miss Marple's mind turned over the clues, each a piece of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning of December 23rd, 1928, brought a slight respite from the snowstorm, though the drifts around Mead Manor remained formidable, ensuring no one could leave or enter. The air inside the manor was thick with tension, the guests moving like actors in a play, their every gesture scrutinized by Miss Jane Marple and Hercule Poirot. Breakfast had been a strained affair, with conversation limited to polite murmurs about the weather. Now, as the clock struck 10 a.m., Miss Marple sat in the small parlour, her knitting needles idle for once, her sharp eyes fixed on a small object she held in her hand, the green silk thread from the manuscript case. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache perfectly groomed despite the hour. Raymond West, ever eager, hovered nearby, his notebook open. "Aunt Jane, Mr. Poirot," he said, "we've questioned everyone, searched the rooms, and still no manuscript. What's next? The police won't get here until the road's clear, and that could be days." Poirot turned, his green eyes gleaming. "Patience, Monsieur West. The little grey cells, they are at work. The manuscript is but one piece of the puzzle. The murder of Sir Reginald, it is the heart of the matter, and the clues, they speak to us if we listen." Miss Marple nodded, holding up the green thread. "This, Mr. Poirot, is no ordinary clue. It is silk, finely woven, and it was caught in the hinge of the arrival."
The room felt colder now, the fire long extinguished, the window still ajar. The bloodstain on the desk had darkened, and the overturned candlestick lay unchanged. Poirot knelt by the desk, his fingers tracing the edge of the blotter. "The letter opener," he mused. "It was taken from this desk, oui? A weapon of opportunity. Yet the blow was precise, through the heart." Miss Marple's gaze fell on the brandy glass, its surface still bearing the faint smudge of lipstick. She bent closer, her spectacles glinting. "Mr. Poirot, this glass troubles me. Sir Reginald was not drinking when he died. Dr. Langley confirmed he was killed instantly. Yet the glass is half full, and this smudge, it is not fresh. The colour is faded, as if applied hours before." Raymond's eyes widened. "You mean someone placed the glass there after the murder, to make it look like Sir Reginald was drinking?" Miss Marple's smile was faint. "Perhaps Raymond, or perhaps someone else was in the room earlier, someone who left their mark and did not expect it to be noticed." Poirot's attention shifted to the floor, where a faint scuff mark marred the polished wood near the desk. It was barely visible, a crescent-shaped smear that suggested a shoe had twisted in haste. "This mark," he said, "it is not from Sir Reginald's shoes, which were polished and unmuddied, nor from Monsieur Crane, who stood by the window. It is fresh, made at the time of the crime." Miss Marple followed his gaze, her mind racing. "In St. Mary Mead, I once solved a theft because of a scuff mark on a parlour floor. A maid had slipped while carrying a stolen necklace, and the mark betrayed her. This mark, Mr. Poirot, suggests someone turned quickly, perhaps to flee or to strike." They examined the room further, noting the precise arrangement of books on the shelves, undisturbed except for a single volume, a history of medieval manuscripts, slightly askew. Poirot pulled it out, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. It was a receipt, dated 2 weeks prior, for the purchase of a rare ink from a London stationer, made out to Victor Crane. "Most curious," Poirot said, handing the receipt to Miss Marple. "Monsieur Crane, he is a literary agent. Yet he purchases ink fit for a scribe, and his cuff, it bears the stain of such ink. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. And his notebook, Mr. Poirot. He guards it closely, yet it is filled with shorthand. I wonder if it contains more than client notes. Raymond, growing impatient, said, "But what about the manuscript? If it's still in the house, where could it be? We've searched every room." Poirot's moustache twitched. "The manuscript, Monsieur West, is hidden where no one thinks to look. It is too large to conceal easily, yet too valuable to destroy. We must consider not only where—" Mrs. Langley's room, it had a faint scent of ink, did it not? And her absence from the drawing-room at 8:35. It gives her time, though not much. They returned to the parlour where Poirot summoned Victor Crane for a private interview. Crane entered, his face pale, his notebook clutched tightly. "Monsieur Crane," Poirot began, "this receipt for rare ink, it is yours, no? And your cuff, it bears the stain of such ink. Tell me, what is your interest in Sir Reginald's manuscript?" Crane's eyes darted nervously. "I'm a literary agent, Mr. Poirot. I deal in rare books. Sir Reginald asked me to appraise the manuscript. The ink, I use it for my work, for annotations. It's nothing unusual." Miss Marple's voice was gentle but probing. "Mr. Crane, your notebook. Might we see it? You seem most attached to it." Crane's grip tightened. "It's private. Client details, contracts. Nothing to do with the murder." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Monsieur, in a murder investigation, nothing is private. If you refuse, we must assume you have something to hide." Reluctantly, Crane handed over the notebook. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes scanning the shorthand. "These notes," he said, "they mention Ashford's prize and a sum, £10,000. A large amount for a literary agent, no?" Crane flushed. "That's a potential deal. I was negotiating with a collector who wanted the manuscript. Sir Reginald was considering selling it." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. "And yet, Mr. Crane, you were in the library when Sir Reginald died. You saw nothing, heard nothing except a thud. Most curious for a man so observant." Crane stammered. "I told you I was looking out the window. I didn't see the killer." As Crane left, Poirot turned to Miss Marple. "His story, it is plausible, but not convincing. The ink, the notebook, the sum of money, these are not red herrings, but pieces of the truth." Miss Marple nodded. "And the scuff mark, Mr. Poirot? It suggests movement, haste. Someone was in that room who should not have been. I recall a case in St. Mary Mead where a similar mark revealed a visitor who claimed to be elsewhere. We must watch Mr. Crane, but also Mrs. Langley, her shawl, her absence. They cannot be ignored." Raymond, scribbling furiously, looked up. "What about Captain Drummond and Celia? They're always together, whispering. Could they be involved?" The killer remained just out of reach. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The afternoon of December 23rd, 1928, cast a pallid light through the snow-laden windows of Mead Manor, where the air was heavy with unspoken secrets. The storm had relented to a gentle flurry, but the roads remained impassable, trapping the guests in a web of suspicion and dread. In the small parlour, Miss Jane Marple sat with her knitting, her mild blue eyes scanning the faces of those around her. Hercule Poirot, his demeanour as pristine as ever, paced slowly,
his hands clasped behind his back. Raymond West, ever the eager scribe, sat nearby, his notebook filled with observations, his face a mixture of fascination and unease. The morning's discoveries, the green silk thread, the ink-stained receipt, the scuff mark in the library, had sharpened the focus of the investigation. Yet the manuscript remained missing, and Sir Reginald Ashford's murder loomed over the house like a spectre. The guests, gathered for luncheon in the dining room, were subdued, their polite exchanges laced with tension. Miss Marple noted the way Captain Drummond's hand lingered near Celia Ashford's, the way Dr. Langley avoided his wife's piercing gaze, and the way Victor Crane clutched his notebook as if it were a lifeline. Poirot broke the silence, his voice calm but incisive. Mesdames et messieurs, the truth, it draws closer, but it is obscured by lies. Each of you has a story, but not all stories are true. Today we shall uncover more, for the little grey cells, they do not rest. Mrs. Langley set her fork down with a clink, her eyes flashing. This is intolerable, Mr. Poirot. You and Miss Marple keep poking into our lives as if we're all guilty. I was in my room for a mere 5 minutes fetching my shawl. What more do you want? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice gentle but probing. Mrs. Langley, it is not the time you were gone, but what you did in that time. Your shawl, so beautifully made, had a scent of ink. Most curious, for a lady who claims no interest in manuscripts. Mrs. Langley's face reddened. Ink? Nonsense! I handle no such thing. You're grasping at straws, Miss Marple. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet, madame, the clues, they do not lie. The green thread from the manuscript case, it matches your shawl. The ink on Monsieur Crane's cuff, it matches a receipt found in the library. These are not accidents. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor, pale and trembling, spoke softly. Please, Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, this is— Know who killed Sir Reginald, but it wasn't us. Miss Marple's gaze softened. My dear, no one accuses you yet. But in St. Mary Mead, I have seen how love, even true love, can cloud the truth. You and Captain Drummond are close, are you not? Celia's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. Drummond's hand tightened on hers, but he said nothing. Victor Crane, his voice strained, interjected. I've told you, I was in the library with Sir Reginald. I saw nothing, heard nothing, except that thud. Why do you keep hounding me about my notebook? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Monsieur Crane, your notebook mentions Ashford's prize and a sum of £10,000. You claim it was a potential sale, but Sir Reginald was not known to part with his treasures. What else did you discuss with him? Crane's fingers twitched. Nothing. He showed me the manuscript, boasted about its secrets. I looked out the window, and then he was dead. Miss Clara Henshaw, who had been silent, adjusted her pince-nez. If I may, Mr. Poirot, the manuscript's secrets were not merely literary. It contained coded genealogies linking the Ashford family to, well, let us say, indiscretions. Sir Reginald was proud, but he feared exposure. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, and Celia gasped. Miss Henshaw, how dare you? Father would never— Miss Marple interjected, her tone calm. Miss Henshaw, you seem well informed. Did Sir Reginald share these fears with you? Miss Henshaw hesitated,
then nodded.
He mentioned it in passing, during a discussion about family histories. He was worried someone might use the manuscript against him.
The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Poirot's gaze swept over the guests.
This is most revealing. A manuscript that holds secrets is a motive for murder, no? But whose secrets, and who would kill to protect them?
As luncheon ended, Poirot and Miss Marple retired to the parlour to confer. Raymond followed, his notebook open.
Aunt Jane, Mr. Poirot, this is getting complicated. The manuscript's secrets, Mrs. Langley's shawl, Crane's notebook, how does it all fit?
Miss Marple's eyes twinkled.
Raymond, in St. Mary Mead, I once knew a woman who lied about a stolen necklace to protect her lover. Her lies were clever, but they unravelled because she could not hide her fear. Here, someone is lying, and their fear is beginning to show.
About the household's routines. Servants, you know, see everything. They returned to the library, where the air was still heavy with the scent of blood and wax. Poirot examined the corridor, noting a faint smudge on the wall near the door, a smear of green silk, barely visible. "This," he said, "is no accident. Someone brushed against the wall, perhaps in a hurry." Miss Marple peered at the smudge, her mind racing. It matches the thread from the manuscript case and the shawl in Mrs. Langley's trunk. But why would she risk such a bold act? Her husband, Dr. Langley, seems uneasy around her. There is a rift there, I think. Raymond, trailing behind, pointed to a small table in the corridor. "Look, Aunt Jane, there's a cigarette stub here, half burned. It wasn't here yesterday." Poirot picked it up, examining it closely. A Turkish cigarette, expensive. Who among our guests smokes such a brand? Miss Marple's memory stirred. Dr. Langley smoked at dinner last night, and I recall the scent, distinctly Turkish, but he claims he was in the drawing room reading. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Another lie, perhaps, or a clue misplaced. We must ask the good doctor about his habits. They summoned Parsons, who confirmed that Dr. Langley was the only guest known to smoke Turkish cigarettes. "He often steps into the corridor for a smoke, sir," Parsons said. "Says the drawing room is too stuffy." Miss Marple nodded. "And did you see him there last night, Parsons? Around 8:40? Parsons hesitated. "I was in the pantry, miss, but I did hear footsteps in the corridor just before the scream. I thought it was one of the guests, but I didn't see who." As Parsons withdrew, Poirot turned to Miss Marple. "The net tightens, mademoiselle. The green smudge, the cigarette stub, the lies, they point to a pattern. Someone was in that corridor, someone who should not have been." Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. "In St. Mary Mead, lies often hide the simplest truths. Dr. Langley's cigarette, Mrs. Langley's shawl, Mr. Crane's notebook, they are threads in a tapestry of deceit. We must pull gently, lest the whole unravel too soon." The clock struck 3 p.m., and the manor seemed to hold its breath, the snow outside a silent witness to the lies surfacing within. Miss Marple's mind pieced together the clues, each a step closer to the truth. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The late afternoon of December 23rd, 1928, cast a ghostly pallor over Danemead Manor, where the snow continued to blanket the world outside, isolating the house and its occupants in a cocoon of suspicion. The air within was charged with unease, the guest, his impeccable attire a stark contrast to the disorder of the situation, stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped, his expression one of quiet determination. Raymond West, seated nearby, scribbled furiously in his notebook, his writer's instinct capturing every nuance of the unfolding drama. The morning's discoveries, the green silk smudge in the corridor, the Turkish cigarette stub, the mounting lies, had deepened the mystery of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder. The missing manuscript, with its coded secrets, remained elusive, but the clues were beginning to form a pattern. The guests, now gathered in the drawing-room for tea, were restless, their polite facades crumbling under the weight of accusation and fear. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the truth, it is like a snowflake, delicate, yet it accumulates until it cannot be ignored. We have learned much, but someone among you holds the key to this crime. I urge you to speak before the net closes. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her face taut, set her teacup down with a clatter. This is preposterous, Mr. Poirot. You and Miss Marple keep circling us like vultures, picking at every detail. I've told you I fetched my shawl and returned to the drawing-room. What more do you want? Miss Marple's voice was gentle, but her words cut deep. Mrs. Langley, it's not only the shawl, but the ink upon it, and the green silk thread matching the smudge in the corridor. In St. Mary Mead, I once knew a woman whose scarf betrayed her theft of a letter. Small things, you see, reveal great truths. Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, and for a moment her composure faltered. Ink? Smudge? I know nothing of these things. But her voice trembled, and her husband, Dr. Langley, shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching towards his tie. Captain Drummond, ever protective, rose to his feet. Enough of this. Celia and I were together, in plain sight. You're hounding innocent people while the real killer laughs at us. Celia Ashford, her face pale, clutched his arm. Hugh, please. They're only trying to help. But her eyes were red, and her voice cracked, betraying a deeper distress. Lady Eleanor, silent until now, suddenly stood, her hands trembling. Stop it, all of you! Reginald is dead, and you bicker like children. I can't bear it. A voice broke, and she swayed, clutching the arm of a chair. Celia rushed to her side, but Lady Eleanor's next words sent a chill through the room. I saw something, before the scream. I didn't want to believe it, but I saw. A shadow in the corridor moving towards the library. The room fell silent, all eyes on Lady Eleanor. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing.
It moved so quickly, and the rustle of fabric, it was like silk. I didn't think it mattered, but now... Her voice trailed off, and she sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Miss Marple exchanged a glance with Poirot. A rustle of silk, Mr. Poirot. It matches the thread, the smudge. Someone was in that corridor who should not have been. Victor Crane, his face ashen, clutched his notebook. I've told you, I was in the library with Sir Reginald. I saw no one else. Why do you keep accusing me? Poirot's moustache twitched. Monsieur Crane, your notebook mentions a sum of £10,000 for Ashford's prize. You claim it was a potential sale, but Sir Reginald feared exposure, did he not? What did you know of his secrets? Crane's voice rose, a note of panic creeping in. Nothing! He showed me the manuscript, boasted about its codes. I didn't kill him! Miss Clara Henshaw, adjusting her pince-nez, spoke up. Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, the manuscript's secrets were dangerous. Sir Reginald told me it linked his family to a scandal, a child born out of wedlock, hidden for generations. He feared someone might use it against him. Celia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's nonsense! Father would never... But her voice faltered, and she looked at her mother, whose face was now a mask of anguish. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A scandal, Mademoiselle Henshaw? This is a motive indeed. And you, Madame Langley, your husband, did he know of this scandal? Dr. Langley's face went white. I knew nothing of it. I'm a physician, not a gossip. Beatrice, tell them you had no part in this. Mrs. Langley's eyes blazed. Morris, you coward! You've been hiding something all along, haven't you? Your cigarettes, you're sneaking about, don't think I haven't noticed. The room erupted in chaos, voices overlapping as accusations flew. Dr. Langley's hands shook, and he stammered. I smoked in the corridor, yes, but I didn't go near the library. I swear it. Poirot raised a hand, restoring order. Enough! Madame Langley, Monsieur Langley, your discord is revealing, but it is not the whole truth. Someone in this room knows more than they say. I propose a test. Tonight, we shall recreate the moments before the scream. Each of you will take your place as you were at 8:40 p.m. We shall see what the shadows reveal. The guests exchanged wary glances, but none dared refuse. As they dispersed to prepare, Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot. Mr. Poirot, Lady Eleanor's confession is a turning point. Her glimpse of the shadow, the rustle of silk, it confirms our suspicions. But Dr. Langley's cigarette stub, so carelessly left, suggests a man distracted, perhaps by guilt. Poirot nodded. Oui, mademoiselle. The emotional cracks, they widen. The killer, they grow careless under pressure. Tonight's reenactment, it will force a mistake. Raymond, his eyes wide,
whispered, Aunt Jane, do you think Lady Eleanor is telling the truth? Or is she protecting someone? Miss Marple's smile was faint. In St. Mary Mead, I once knew a mother who lied to shield her son from scandal. Lady Eleanor's tears are real, but her words, they may hide more than they reveal. We must watch closely. At 8 p.m., the guests gathered in the drawing room, their faces tense as Poirot directed them to their positions. Lady Eleanor stood by the sherry decanter, Celia and Captain Drummond near the piano, Dr. Langley by the fire, Mrs. Langley near the door, Miss Henshaw at the piano, and Victor Crane by the window, as if to step into the library. Raymond stood in the hall, mimicking his earlier errand for his cigarette case. Poirot clapped his hands. Begin. Move as you did at 8:40. Madame Langley, you leave for your shawl. Monsieur West, to the hall. The rest, continue as you were. Mrs. Langley swept out, her green silk shawl trailing. Raymond stepped into the corridor. Miss Henshaw played a halting tune, while Celia and Drummond whispered by the piano. Lady Eleanor poured sherry, her hands shaking. Poirot and Miss Marple watched from the doorway, their eyes sharp. As the clock neared 8:47, a faint rustle came from the corridor, followed by a muffled thud. Poirot's head snapped up, and Miss Marple's needles, which she had resumed, paused. They hurried to the corridor, where Mrs. Langley stood frozen, her shawl caught on the table edge, a small ink bottle in her hand, its cap loose, a drop staining the floor. "Madame!" Poirot exclaimed. "What is this?" Mrs. Langley's face crumpled, and she sank to her knees, the ink bottle falling. I didn't mean to. I only wanted the manuscript. Maurice was in debt, desperate. I thought I could sell it, but I didn't kill him, I swear." The room fell silent, the guests staring in shock. Miss Marple's voice was soft. "Mrs. Langley, you were in the corridor. The ink, the silk, they betray you. But the truth, my dear, is not yet complete." The clock struck 8:47, echoing the moment of the scream. The emotional turning point had arrived, and the truth was closer than ever. Chapter 9. The Trap. The clock's chime at 8:47 p.m. on December 23, 1928, reverberated through Mead Manor, a stark reminder of the moment Sir Reginald Ashford's life had ended. The reenactment in the drawing room had unravelled Mrs. Beatrice Langley's composure, her confession about the manuscript spilling forth like ink from the bottle she clutched. The guests stood frozen, their faces a tableau of shock and suspicion as Miss Jane Marple and Hercule Poirot surveyed the scene from the corridor. The snow outside continued its gentle fall, sealing the manor's secrets within its walls. Raymond West, his notebook clutched tightly, watched with wide eyes, sensing the investigation was nearing a critical juncture. Mrs. Langley, still on her knees, her green silk shawl pooled around her, stammered through tears.
I didn't kill him. I swear it, Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple. I only wanted the manuscript. Maurice's debts, they were crushing us. I thought I could sell it quietly, but when I reached the library, he was already dead.
Poirot's green eyes gleamed with intensity. Madame Langley, your confession, it is most illuminating. You were in the corridor with ink and silk at the time of the murder, but you claim Sir Reginald was dead when you arrived. Tell me, what did you see? Mrs. Langley's hands trembled, the ink bottle now on the floor, its dark stains spreading. I saw him slumped over the desk, the letter opener in his chest. The window was open, the manuscript gone. I panicked and ran back to the drawing room. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but incisive. Mrs. Langley, you returned to the drawing room before the scream at 8:47. Yet Lady Eleanor heard a rustle of silk, and we found a smudge on the corridor wall. Your shawl, perhaps, caught as you fled. Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, but she shook her head. I didn't touch the wall. I was careful. I didn't want to be seen. Poirot clapped his hands, drawing the guests' attention. Mesdames et messieurs, we are close to the truth, but it is not yet complete. Madame Langley's confession, it reveals a motive, but not the whole story. Tonight, we shall set a trap. The killer, they believe they have outwitted us, but the little grey cells, they are not so easily deceived. Captain Drummond stepped forward, his face stern. A trap? This is absurd. Mrs. Langley's admitted to trying to steal the manuscript. Isn't that enough? Celia Ashford, clinging to Drummond's arm, nodded. She was in the corridor. She had the chance. Why keep tormenting us? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. My dear, in St. Mary Mead, I once knew a man who confessed to a theft to hide a greater crime. Mrs. Langley's confession is truthful but partial. We must look beyond the obvious.
Library at 10 p.m. Each of you will bring something, a small item from your room, something you value. Place it on the desk where Sir Reginald died. The killer, they will feel the pressure, and they will make a mistake. The guests murmured, their unease palpable. Lady Eleanor, pale and trembling, clutched her handkerchief. Mr. Poirot, is this necessary? My husband's death, it's too much to bear. Poirot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. Madame, it is for your husband that we do this. The truth, it will bring peace. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot. Mr. Poirot, this trap is bold. The killer will be watching, but so will we. Mrs. Langley's confession points to greed, but the cigarette stub, the lipstick on the glass, the scuff mark, they suggest another hand. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, mademoiselle. The killer, they are clever, but not clever enough. The items they choose tonight, they will reveal their heart. Raymond, his voice low, asked, Aunt Jane, do you think Mrs. Langley is lying? She seemed genuinely distraught. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. Distraught, yes, but truthful? Only in part. Her story fits the clues, but not all of them. The lipstick, Raymond, troubles me. No woman in this house admits to wearing it, yet it was on the glass. Someone is hiding more than a theft. At 10 p.m., the guests reassembled in the library, the air heavy with the scent of wax and lingering tragedy. The desk, now cleared of blood, stood as a stark stage. Poirot stood by the window, Miss Marple near the door, their eyes scanning each guest as they entered with their chosen items. Lady Eleanor placed a small silver locket on the desk.
her hands trembling. "It was Reginald's gift to me, on our wedding day," she whispered. Celia, her eyes red, set down a photograph of her and Captain Drummond. "This means everything to me," she said, her voice breaking. Captain Drummond placed a war medal beside it, his jaw tight. "For courage," he said gruffly. "It's all I have left of those days." Dr. Langley, his hands unsteady, placed a medical journal. "My work," he muttered. "It's what keeps me sane." Mrs. Langley, her face pale, set down a pearl brooch. "It was my mother's," she said, her voice flat. "I have nothing else of hers." Victor Crane, clutching his notebook, hesitated before placing it on the desk. "My work like Dr. Langley's," he said. "It's my livelihood." Miss Clara Henshaw placed a genealogical chart, her pince-nez glinting. "The Ashford lineage," she said. "It's my passion." Poirot stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the items. "Merci, mes amis. Each of you has chosen something of value, but one of guest in turn. Let us consider the clues. The green silk thread, found in the manuscript case, matches Madame Langley's shawl. The ink on the Sieur Crane's cuff, it matches the receipt for rare ink. The cigarette stub in the corridor, it is Turkish, smoked by Monsieur Langley. The lipstick on the brandy glass, it is a mystery, for no one admits to wearing it. And the scuff mark, it suggests a hurried movement, a twist of the foot." Mrs. Langley's voice rose, sharp with fear. "I told you, I didn't kill him. I wanted the manuscript, yes, but he was dead when I got there." Dr. Langley's face went white. "Beatrice, stop! You're making it worse. I was in the corridor, smoking, but I didn't go into the library. I swear it." Celia's eyes filled with tears. "Stop it, all of you! Father's dead, and you're tearing us apart." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "The trap, it is set. The killer, they feel the pressure now. They have placed their item on the desk, but their heart, it betrays them. Look closely, mes amis. One of these items is not what it seems." Miss Marple's gaze fell on the desk, her mind racing. The locket, the photograph, the medal, the journal, the brooch, the notebook, the chart, all seemed innocuous. Yet one stood out. Victor Crane's notebook, its leather cover slightly worn, had a faint bulge, as if something were tucked inside. "Mr. Poirot," she said softly, "might we examine Mr. Crane's notebook more closely?" Crane's face paled. "It's just notes. You've seen it." Poirot picked up the notebook, flipping it open. Tucked between the pages was a single sheet of parchment, its edges frayed, its script ancient. The room gasped as he held it up. "The manuscript," he said, "or a page of it. Monsieur Crane, explain." Crane staggered back, his voice hoarse. I found it on the floor, after the murder. I didn't want to be blamed, so I hid it." The trap had sprung, but Miss Marple's eyes remained sharp. "A page, Mr. Poirot, but not the whole. The killer is still among us, and they are watching." The clock struck 10:30 p.m., the tension in the library palpable. The trap had revealed a piece of the truth, but the full picture remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of Danemead Manor. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The library at Danemead Manor stood hushed, save for the faint crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind outside. It was 10:45 p.m. on December 23, 1928.
Faces of the assembled with her characteristic quiet intensity. Raymond West, his notebook open, scribbled furiously, sensing the climax of the mystery approaching. Poirot's green eyes gleamed as he lowered the parchment, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the trap it has sprung, and the truth it begins to emerge. Monsieur Crane, you claim you found this page on the floor after Sir Reginald's death. Yet you hid it, risking suspicion. Why? Crane's face was ashen, his hands trembling. I panicked. I knew how it would look, me in the library, the manuscript gone. I thought if I kept it, I could return it later, without anyone knowing. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but piercing. Mr. Crane, in St. Mary Mead, I once knew a man who hid a stolen watch to avoid blame, only to find it implicated him further. A single page is not the whole manuscript. Where is the rest? Crane shook his head, his voice desperate. I don't know. I swear, I only found that page. Poirot clapped his hands, drawing all eyes to him. Enough, monsieur. The page, it is a clue, but not the solution. The killer, they are among us, and they grow uneasy. Let us reconstruct the crime step by step, with the little gray cells as our guide. He paced the room, his small frame radiating authority. Sir Reginald was stabbed at 8:47 p.m., the letter opener driven through his heart. The manuscript case was open, the contents gone. The window was ajar, with footprints in the snow, a red herring, for no one could escape in such a storm. The candlestick was overturned, the brandy glass bore a smudge of lipstick, and a green silk thread was caught in the case. In the corridor, a scuff mark and a Turkish cigarette stub. And now, a page of the manuscript, hidden by Monsieur Crane. The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes darting to one another. Lady Eleanor clutched her locket, her face pale. Celia Ashford leaned against Captain Drummond, her expression defiant. Dr. Langley adjusted his tie, his wife glaring at him with barely concealed contempt. Miss Clara Henshaw's pince-nez glinted as she clutched her genealogical chart. Poirot continued, his voice deliberate. Let us consider the timeline. At 8:40, Sir Reginald left the drawing room with Monsieur Crane to view the manuscript. Madame Langley was absent, fetching her shawl. Monsieur West stepped into the hall for his cigarette case. Madame Eleanor poured sherry. Mademoiselle Ashford and Capitaine Drummond were at the piano, Monsieur Langley by the fire, and Mademoiselle Henshaw played a tune. At 8:47, the scream, Madame Eleanor's, brought everyone to the library. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes fixed on the desk. And yet, Mr. Poirot, the clues tell a different...
Now, this page, hidden by Mr. Crane. Each clue points to a different person, yet they must connect. Poirot's moustache twitched. Précisément, Mademoiselle Marple. The killer. They are clever, but they have made one mistake too many. Let us begin with the lipstick. It is faded, not fresh, suggesting it was placed there before the murder, perhaps to implicate someone. But who? Celia's voice trembled. You're saying someone staged the scene? But why? Poirot's gaze softened. Mademoiselle, the why is the heart of the matter. The manuscript, with its coded secrets, threatened someone's reputation. Mademoiselle Henshaw spoke of a scandal, an Ashford child born out of wedlock. Who would kill to keep such a secret? Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping. No, it can't be. Reginald never spoke of it, but I knew. He feared the truth would ruin Celia's prospects. Celia gasped, her eyes wide. Mother, what are you saying? Poirot raised a hand. Madame, your distress, it is genuine, but it hides something. You saw a shadow in the corridor, heard a rustle of silk. You protect someone, no? Lady Eleanor's tears flowed freely, but she shook her head. I don't know what I saw. It was so quick. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice kind but firm. Lady Eleanor, in St. Mary Mead, I once knew a mother who shielded her daughter from a painful truth. Your love for Celia is clear, but the truth cannot be hidden forever.
Poirot turned to Dr. Langley, whose hand shook as he lit another Turkish cigarette. Monsieur Langley, the cigarette stub in the corridor, it is yours. You claim you smoke there, but not in the library. Yet the scuff mark suggests movement, haste. Were you there when Sir Reginald died? Dr. Langley's face crumpled. I was in the corridor, yes, but I didn't go in. I heard a noise, a thud, and I ran back to the drawing room. I swear, I didn't kill him. Mrs. Langley's voice was sharp. Maurice, you fool! Your debts, you're sneaking about. You've dragged us into this. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Madame Langley, your shawl, your ink, your absence. You confess to wanting the manuscript. But did you see more than you admit? Mrs. Langley's defiance wavered. I told you, he was dead when I reached the library. I saw someone, a figure, slipping out. But it was dark, and I didn't want to be caught. Poirot's gaze shifted to Captain Drummond and Celia. Capitaine, Mademoiselle Ashford, your alibis depend on each other, yet your photograph, placed on the desk, it speaks of a bond. Did Sir Reginald—
Secrets. Did you share this with anyone? Miss Henshaw's pince-nez glinted.
Only Sir Reginald. He confided in me as a fellow scholar. I had no reason to harm him.
Poirot clapped his hands, silencing the room.
The truth, it is here. The killer staged a scene. Footprints, lipstick, a candlestick, to mislead. But the green thread, the ink, the cigarette, the scuff mark, they betray the truth. The manuscript's page, hidden by Monsieur Crane, was a desperate act, but not the act of the killer. The killer is Captain Drummond. A collective gasp filled the room. Drummond's face went white, his hand gripping Celia's. That's absurd. I was with Celia. Poirot's voice was unrelenting. Non, Capitaine, you were with Mademoiselle Ashford, but you slipped away just for a moment to the library. The scuff mark, it matches your boots, polished, but with a slight wear on the heel. The lipstick, it was Celia's, taken from her room earlier to stage the scene. You knew of the manuscript scandal and Sir Reginald's disapproval of your engagement. You killed him to protect your future with Celia, and you hid the manuscript, planning to retrieve it later. Celia's sob echoed. Hugh, no, tell them it's not true. Drummond's shoulders slumped, his voice hoarse. I only wanted to talk to him. He threatened to cut Celia off. I lost my temper. The letter opener was there. I didn't mean to. The room erupted in chaos, but Poirot's voice cut through. The trap, it worked. The photograph, Capitaine, it was your undoing. You placed it on the desk, a gesture of love, but also of guilt. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes sad but resolute. In St. Mary Mead, love has led many astray. Captain Drummond, your heart betrayed you. The clock struck 11 p.m., and the truth lay bare, stark against the snowbound silence of Danemead Manor. The Reflection. The library at Danemead Manor, bathed in the dim glow of electric lamps, seemed to hold its breath as the clock struck 11:15 p.m. on December 23rd, 1928. The snow outside continued its silent vigil, sealing the manor in a world apart. The revelation of Captain Hugh Drummond as Sir Reginald Ashford's killer had left the guests in a state of shock, their faces etched with disbelief, sorrow, and relief. Celia Ashford's sobs echoed softly, her hands covering her face as she sat, supported by her mother, Lady Eleanor. Miss Jane Marple, this tragedy,
The manuscript, it was not the motive, but the shield for a deeper wound, love, and the fear of its loss. Drummond, his military bearing shattered, sat with his head bowed, his hands cuffed by Parsons, who had been instructed to restrain him until the constable could arrive. "I didn't mean to kill him," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I only wanted to reason with him. You said I'd never marry Celia, that the manuscript's secrets would ruin us. I lost control." Celia's sobs grew louder, and Lady Eleanor, her own eyes wet, held her daughter tightly.
"Oh, Hugh," Celia whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?"
Miss Marple's voice was gentle, her eyes soft with understanding. "My dear, in St. Mary Mead I have seen how love can drive even the strongest to desperate acts. Captain Drummond acted to protect you, but in doing so, he lost his way." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "The little grey cells. They saw through the red herrings, the footprints, the overturned candlestick, the lipstick on the glass. These were distractions, but the clues, the green thread, the cigarette stub, the scuff mark, the hidden page, they pointed to the truth. Capitaine Drummond, you staged the scene to suggest an outside thief, but your boots betrayed you, and your love for Mademoiselle Ashford revealed your motive." Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her face pale but composed, spoke up, her voice sharp. "And what of me? You accused me of stealing the manuscript, Mr. Poirot. I admitted to wanting it, but I didn't kill him." Poirot's gaze softened. "Madame, your confession was truthful but incomplete. You entered the library, saw Sir Reginald dead, and took the opportunity to search for the manuscript, the green thread from your shawl, the ink on your hands. These were your mistakes, but you are not the killer." Dr. Langley, his hands trembling, lit another Turkish cigarette. "Then why my cigarette stub? I told you I smoked in the corridor, but I didn't go near the library." Miss Marple's smile was faint. "Dr. Langley, your cigarette was a distraction, perhaps unintentional. You were in the corridor, as you said, but your presence there muddied the waters. In St. Mary Mead I once knew a man whose careless habit, leaving his pipe ash, led us to a thief, though he was innocent of the greater crime." Victor Crane, still clutching his recovered notebook, looked shaken. "And the page I hid? I only wanted to avoid suspicion. I didn't know what to do." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monsieur Crane, your fear made you foolish but not guilty. The page, it was a piece of the puzzle but not the heart. The heart was Capitaine Drummond's act of desperation." Miss Clara Henshaw, her pince-nez glinting, spoke softly. "The manuscript secrets, they were dangerous. Sir Reginald feared exposure, but I never imagined it would lead to this." Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle.
"Mademoiselle Henshaw, your knowledge of the Ashford scandal was valuable, but you did not wield the weapon. The killer, he acted alone, driven by a moment of passion." Raymond, unable to contain himself, leaned toward Miss Marple. "Aunt Jane, it's incredible how you and Mr. Poirot pieced it together. The clues were so small, yet they told the whole story." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Raymond, the smallest things, a thread, a smudge, a glance, reveal the human heart. People are not so different, whether in St. Mary Mead or a grand manor. They love, they fear, they err." Poirot clapped his hands, drawing the group's attention. "Mes amis, the case is solved, but the lesson remains. The truth, it is not found in haste or in chaos, but in order and method. The little grey cells, they see what the eyes cannot. And with Mademoiselle Marple's insight into human nature, we have brought light to this dark affair." Lady Eleanor, her voice trembling, spoke at last. "Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, thank you. It's a terrible truth, but at least we know. Celia, my darling, we will endure this." Celia nodded, her tears subsiding, though her face remained etched with grief. "I loved Hugh, but I loved Father too. I don't know how to go on." Miss Marple reached out, her hand resting lightly on Celia's.
My dear, you will find strength. In time, the heart heals, though the scars remain. As the guests began to disperse, their emotions raw, but their questions answered, Poirot turned to Miss Marple. Mademoiselle, your assistance was invaluable. Your knowledge of the human heart, it complements the logic of Hercule Poirot. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Mr. Poirot, your method is remarkable, but it is the simple truths of village life that often guide me. Together, we have done justice to Sir Reginald. Raymond, gathering his notes, looked at them both with admiration. This will make an extraordinary story, Aunt Jane. A lost Agatha Christie novel, if ever there was one. Miss Marple chuckled softly. Perhaps, Raymond, but stories are best left to those who live them. Our work here is done. Poirot inclined his head. We, and now we depart. The constable will arrive when the snow permits, and Capitaine Drummond will face justice. For us, it is time to rest the little grey cells. As the clock struck midnight, the manor settled into a quiet outside, softening to a gentle flurry, though the roads remained impassable. The revelation of Captain Hugh Drummond as Sir Reginald Ashford's killer had left the guests in a state of subdued shock, their emotions raw from the previous night's confrontation. Yet, one piece of the puzzle remained unresolved, the whereabouts of the missing manuscript, save for the single page found in Victor Crane's notebook. Miss Jane Marple, seated in the small parlor with her knitting, her blue eyes sharp behind her spectacles, pondered this final mystery. Hercule Poirot, his mustache as pristine as ever, stood by the window, his hands clasped, his mind clearly at work. Raymond West, his notebook open, hovered nearby, his writer's curiosity undimmed by the grim events. The parlor was quiet, save for the crackle of the fire and the occasional creak of the manor's ancient timbers. The guests, gathered for a late breakfast in the dining room, spoke in hushed tones, their faces marked by exhaustion and unease. Lady Eleanor and Celia Ashford sat close together, their grief palpable. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her earlier defiance muted, avoided her husband's gaze. Dr. Langley lit another Turkish cigarette, his hands unsteady. Victor Crane clutched his notebook, his expression one of lingering guilt, while Miss Clara Henshaw adjusted her pince-nez, her genealogical fervor subdued. Poirot turned from the window, his voice breaking the silence. Mesdames et messieurs, the killer, he is revealed, and justice awaits him. But the manuscript, it remains hidden. This is no mere theft, it is a piece of the truth we must uncover. The little grey cells, they insist on completion. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking softly. Indeed, Mr. Poirot. In St. Mary Mead, I once found a stolen brooch hidden in a place no one thought to look, inside a hollowed-out book. The manuscript is large, but it is here, in this house. The killer hid it, and we must find it before the snow clears. Raymond, his eyes wide, leaned forward. Aunt Jane, Mr. Poirot, do you think Drummond hid it? He confessed to the murder, but he didn't mention the manuscript. Poirot's mustache twitched. Monsieur West, Capitaine Drummond's confession was of the heart, not of the mind. He killed in a moment of passion, but the manuscript's disappearance, it is deliberate. Someone else may have taken it, or he hid it to protect his motive. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the guests in the dining room, visible through the open door. The clues, Mr. Poirot. The green thread, the ink, the scuff mark, they pointed to Drummond, but also to others. Mrs. Langley's confession about wanting the manuscript. Mr. Crane's hidden page. Dr. Langley's cigarette stub. These suggest a web of intentions. The manuscript is the key to their... By someone who fears its secrets. I propose a thorough search, not of your rooms,
but of the common spaces, places where no one claims ownership. Mrs. Langley's eyes narrowed. Another search. I've told you I didn't take it. I only looked for it after he was dead. Dr. Langley's voice was sharp. Beatrice, enough. You've said too much already. Celia, her face pale, spoke softly. Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, if the manuscript holds Father's secrets, I want it found. I need to know what he was protecting me from. Lady Eleanor clutched her daughter's hand, her voice trembling. Celia, my darling, some truths are better left buried. Miss Marple's smile was kind but firm. Lady Eleanor, in my experience, buried truths have a way of surfacing. Let us find the manuscript, and with it, the final piece of this puzzle. Poirot led the group through the manor, starting with the library. The desk, now cleared, offered no new clues, but Miss Marple's attention fell on the bookshelves. The history of medieval manuscripts, slightly askew when they found the receipt, caught her eye. She pulled it out, revealing a hollowed-out compartment behind it. Inside was the manuscript, its vellum pages carefully folded, its leather binding intact. A collective gasp filled the room. Poirot lifted the manuscript, his eyes gleaming. Voila! The prize! Hidden where no one would look, yet in plain sight. Capitan Drummond, did you place it here? Drummond, still cuffed and guarded by Parsons, shook his head. I didn't. I took it from the case after I stabbed him. I hid it in the library, but not there. Someone moved it. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Someone who knew it was taken, but not by whom. Mr. Crane, you found a page. Did you suspect where the rest might be? Crane's face flushed. I told you I found the page on the floor. I didn't know about the book. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langley. Madame, you searched the library after the murder. Did you see the manuscript? Mrs. Langley's defiance wavered. I looked, yes, but I didn't find it. I swear, I didn't touch it. Miss Marple's voice was soft. Yet the ink on your shawl, Mrs. Langley, suggests you handled something in that room. Perhaps you found the manuscript and hid it again, fearing discovery? Mrs. Langley's eyes widened, but she shook her head. No, I didn't. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Langley, whose cigarette trembled in his hand. Monsieur Langley, your cigarette stub was in the corridor. Were you there when the manuscript was moved? Dr. Langley's face went white. I saw Beatrice in the library, after the scream. She was rummaging through the desk. I thought she was looking for money, not the manuscript. I didn't say anything because—
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The manuscript was hidden by someone who knew its value, but not its danger. Captain Drummond took it in a panic, but another hand placed it here, in this book, a place of scholarship, not violence. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you spoke of the manuscript's secrets. Did you know its hiding place? Miss Henshaw's pince-nez glinted as she shook her head. I knew its value, but not where it was. I would never touch it. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. In St. Mary Mead, I once found a stolen letter hidden in a book of sermons, placed there by a vicar's wife who feared scandal. Here, I believe Lady Eleanor, in her grief, found the manuscript after Drummond's act and hid it to protect Celia. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. I found it on the floor after the scream. I thought it would ruin Celia's future. I hid it in the book, hoping no one would look there. Celia's voice was a whisper. Mother, why didn't you tell me? Lady Eleanor's tears fell. I wanted to protect you, darling. The scandal, it would have destroyed you. Poirot nodded, his expression solemn. The manuscript is found, the truth complete. Captain Drummond killed for love, Madame Langley sought to steal for greed, and Madame Eleanor hid the truth for her daughter. The little grey cells, they have prevailed. Miss Marple folded her knitting, her voice soft. Human nature, Mr. Poirot, is both simple and complex. In St. Mary Mead, I have seen such acts of love and fear. They lead us astray, but they also lead us home. The clock struck noon, and the manor seemed to exhale. The weight of the mystery lifted. The manuscript, now on the desk, was a silent testament to the secrets it held, and the lives it had altered. Chapter 13. The Shadows of Motive. The afternoon of December 24th, 1928, settled over Mead Manor with a quiet that felt almost reverent, as if the snow outside had muffled not only sound but the lingering echoes of the tragedy within. The manuscript, now recovered from its hiding place in the hollowed-out book, lay on the library desk, its ancient pages a silent witness to the motives that had driven Sir Reginald Ashford's murder. The guests, still reeling from the revelations of Captain Hugh Drummond's guilt and Lady Eleanor's desperate act to protect her daughter, gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mixture of relief and lingering unease. Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking softly, her blue eyes keen as they observed the subtle currents of emotion. Hercule Poirot, his demeanour as precise as ever, stood near the window, his hands clasped, his mind clearly sifting through the final threads of the case. Raymond West, his notebook now filled with the drama's details, leaned toward Drummond's confessed, and Mother's act explained.
Is the puzzle truly solved?
Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile.
Raymond, in St. Mary Mead, I have learned that a puzzle is not complete until every motive is understood. The murder is solved, but the shadows of why, those linger. We must ensure no detail is overlooked.
Poirot turned, his green eyes gleaming.
Mademoiselle Marple speaks wisely, Monsieur West. The little grey cells, they are satisfied with the killer's identity. But the motives, they are like shadows cast by many lights. Let us examine these shadows to ensure the truth is whole.
The guests, summoned to the drawing room, sat in uneasy silence. Captain Drummond, still cuffed and under Parsons' watchful eye, stared at the floor, his earlier defiance replaced by a hollow resignation. Celia Ashford clung to her mother, Lady Eleanor, whose face was pale but composed. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her earlier bravado gone, sat apart from her husband, Dr. Maurice Langley, whose nervous tic of adjusting his tie was more pronounced. Victor Crane clutched his notebook, his expression one of guarded relief, while Miss Clara Henshaw adjusted her pince-nez, her genealogical zeal subdued by the weight of the truth. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding.
Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Sir Reginald is solved, the manuscript recovered. Yet motives, they are the heart of this crime. Captain Drummond acted for love, Madame Eleanor for protection, Madame Langley for greed. But are there other shadows we have not seen?
Mrs. Langley's voice was sharp, though less certain than before.
I've admitted my part, Mr. Poirot. I wanted the manuscript to settle Morris's debts, but I didn't kill anyone. Why keep dragging me into this?
Miss Marple's needles paused, her tone gentle but incisive.
Mrs. Langley, your greed was clear, but your actions in the library, searching after the murder, suggest you saw more than you admitted. In St. Mary Mead, I once knew a woman who saw a crime but stayed silent to protect herself. What did you see, my dear?
Mrs. Langley's eyes flickered, her hands twisting in her lap.
I told you I saw a figure slipping out of the library, but it was too dark to tell who. I thought it was a servant, or someone else. I didn't want to be caught there, so I ran.
Poirot's moustache twitched.
A figure, madame? This is new. You did not mention this before. Why now?
Mrs. Langley's face flushed.
The scuff mark, however, suggests movement, a twist of the foot, as if turning to flee. Were you closer to the library than you say? Dr. Langley's face went white. I may have stepped closer to listen. I heard a thud, but I didn't go in. I swear it. Celia, her voice breaking, interjected. Please stop this. Hugh's confessed. Isn't that enough? Why keep tormenting us? Captain Drummond looked up, his eyes hollow. Celia, I did it. I killed your father. But I didn't hide the manuscript in that book. Someone else did that. Lady Eleanor, her voice trembling, nodded. It was me, as I said. I found it on the floor after Hugh's act. I hid it to protect Celia from the scandal. Poirot's gaze softened. Madame, your love for your daughter is clear, but the manuscript's secrets. What were they precisely? Mademoiselle Henshaw, you spoke of a scandal, a child born out of wedlock. Can you elaborate? Miss Henshaw hesitated, her pince-nez glinting. Sir Reginald confided in me that the manuscript contained coded genealogies, linking the Ashford family to a scandal in the 18th century. A child born to an Ashford ancestor and a servant was hidden to preserve the family's honor. He feared its exposure would ruin Celia's marriage prospects. Celia's eyes widened. Father never told me. Why would he keep such a thing secret? Lady Eleanor's tears fell. He wanted to protect you, darling. He thought Captain Drummond might use it against us, to force his way into the family. Drummond shook his head. I didn't care about the scandal. I loved Celia, but Sir Reginald wouldn't listen. He said I'd never be good enough. Victor Crane, his voice low, spoke up. The manuscript's value wasn't just historical. Collectors would pay a fortune for it, scandal or not. I admit I wanted to broker its sale, but I didn't kill for it. Poirot nodded, his eyes sweeping the room. Each of you had a motive. Greed, love, protection, fear. But the shadows of these motives converge on one truth. Captain Drummond acted alone in the murder, but the manuscript's journey was a shared deception. Madame Langley searched for it. Madame Eleanor hid it. Monsieur Crane kept a page. The little grey cells, they see the pattern. Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. In St. Mary Mead, I have seen how motives intertwine. A woman once stole to protect her family, another lied to shield a lover. Here, each of you acted for your own reasons, but only one struck the fatal blow. Raymond, his notebook closed, looked at his aunt. Aunt Jane, it's like one of your village stories, but so much more complex. Everyone had a part to play. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Hands, drawing attention. The shadows are clear now. The manuscript is found. The killer confessed. The motives laid bare. When the snow clears, the constable will take Captain Drummond, and the manuscript will be returned to its rightful place. For now, mes amis, let us rest. The guests dispersed, their emotions raw, but their questions answered. Lady Eleanor and Celia retreated to their rooms, their bond strengthened by shared grief. Mrs. Langley and Dr. Langley exchanged a wary glance, their rift deepened by mutual distrust. Crane and Miss Henshaw left in silence, their roles in the drama secondary but significant. As the clock struck 3 p.m., Miss Marple turned to Poirot. Mr. Poirot, your method is remarkable, but it is the human heart that tells the story. We have seen its shadows, and they are clear at last. Poirot bowed slightly. Mademoiselle Marple, your insight is unmatched. Together we have illuminated the truth. The snow outside fell softly, a final veil over the manor's secrets, as the investigation drew to a close. The late afternoon of December 24th 1928, draped Dane Mead Manor in a soft grey light, the snow outside falling in delicate flakes, as if reluctant to disturb the fragile peace within. The revelation of Captain Hugh Drummond's guilt, the recovery of the manuscript, and the exposure of the tangled motives behind Sir Reginald Ashford's murder had left the guests subdued, their emotions a mix of relief, sorrow, and lingering unease. The manor, still cut off by the snowdrifts, felt like a world suspended in time, its secrets now laid bare, but not yet fully settled. Miss Jane Marple sat in the small parlour, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm, her sharp blue eyes scanning the faces of those around her. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a testament to his unyielding precision, stood by the fire, his hands clasped, his mind clearly tying up the final threads of the case. Raymond West, his notebook now a chronicle of the manor's drama, sat beside his aunt, his expression one of quiet awe. The guests, gathered for tea in the drawing-room, spoke in hushed tones, their earlier tensions softened by the resolution of the mystery. Lady Eleanor and Celia Ashford sat close together, their hands entwined, their grief tempered by the truth. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her defiance replaced by wary resignation, avoided her husband's gaze. Dr. Maurice Langley, his nervous tic more pronounced, lit another Turkish cigarette, the smoke curling upward like a question mark. Victor Crane, his notebook returned to him, sat quietly, his earlier panic subsided. Miss Clara Henshaw, her pen—
They demand that every thread be tied. There are small matters, details, that must be clarified before we leave this house. Miss Marple nodded, her needles pausing. Indeed, Mr. Poirot, in St. Mary Mead, I have found that even the smallest loose end can unravel a truth if left unattended. The lipstick on the brandy glass, for instance, it remains unexplained. No woman here admits to wearing it, yet it was there, a deliberate clue. Raymond leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Aunt Jane, do you think it was planted to mislead us? Like the footprints in the snow? Poirot's moustache twitched. Monsieur West, you are perceptive. The lipstick, it is a distraction, but not without purpose. Let us revisit the clues to ensure no shadow remains. He turned to the guests, his green eyes piercing. The lipstick on the glass, it was faded, suggesting it was placed before the murder. Captain Drummond, you staged the scene to suggest an outsider, footprints, an open window, a toppled candlestick. Did you also place the lipstick? Drummond, cuffed and seated under Parsons' watchful eye, shook his head, his voice low. No, Mr. Poirot. I took the manuscript, stabbed Sir Reginald in a moment of rage, and opened the window to make it look like a theft. But the glass, I didn't touch it. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Curious, Mr. Poirot. The lipstick suggests a woman's presence, yet none here claim it. In St. Mary Mead, I once solved a theft because a woman's hairpin was found where it shouldn't be. Here, I suspect the lipstick was meant to implicate someone, or to protect another. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Celia. Mademoiselle Ashford, you and Captain Drummond were close. Did you ever wear lipstick, perhaps in private, that you did not admit to? Celia's cheeks flushed, and she shook her head. No, I don't wear it. Father didn't approve. It wasn't mine. Lady Eleanor, her voice trembling, spoke up. Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, must we continue this? The truth is known. Hugh killed Reginald. I hid the manuscript. What more is there? Miss Marple's voice was gentle, but firm. Lady Eleanor, the truth is like a tapestry. Every thread must be in place. The lipstick, it was no accident. Someone placed it to confuse or to shield. Poirot turned to Mrs. Langley, whose face tightened. Madame Langley, your shawl bore traces of ink, and you were in the library after the murder. Did you see the glass, perhaps touch it? Mrs. Langley's eyes flashed.
I told you I searched the desk for the manuscript, but I didn't touch the glass. I saw it there, but I thought it was Sir Reginald's. Dr. Langley, his cigarette trembling, interjected. Beatrice, you're not helping yourself. I saw you in the library, rummaging. You didn't mention the glass.
In corridors, leaving stubs everywhere.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the bickering. Enough! The lipstick. It is a small clue, but significant. Let us consider another detail. The green silk thread found in the manuscript case at the corridor. Madame Langley, your shawl matches it, but you claim you only entered after the murder, yet the thread was caught in the case's hinge, suggesting it was there when the manuscript was taken. Mrs. Langley's face paled. I may have brushed against the case. I was frantic, looking for the manuscript, but I didn't take it. Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. And the scuff mark, Mr. Poirot, near the library door? It matches Captain Drummond's boots, but it also suggests haste. Someone else was there, perhaps watching, perhaps fleeing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement, Mademoiselle Marple. The clues, they weave a story. Captain Drummond killed Sir Reginald. Madame Langley searched the library. Madame Eleanor hid the manuscript. But the lipstick, it points to a final shadow. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you knew of the manuscript's secrets. Did you ever visit the library before the murder, perhaps to examine it? Miss Henshaw's pince-nez glinted as she shook her head. No, Mr. Poirot, I spoke with Sir Reginald about its history, but I never touched it. I'm a scholar, not a thief. Miss Marple's smile was faint. Yet, Miss Henshaw, your knowledge of the Ashford scandal was detailed. In St. Mary Mead, I once knew a woman who knew too much about a neighbour's secrets and used it to her advantage. Did you perhaps leave a trace in the library? Miss Henshaw's hands trembled and her voice faltered. I did visit the library earlier that day to see the manuscript. Sir Reginald showed it to me. I may have touched the glass, but I wore no lipstick. Poirot's moustache twitched. Aha! The glass. It was touched by you, Mademoiselle Henshaw, but the lipstick was added later by Captain Drummond to mislead. He took it from Mademoiselle Ashford's room where she kept it hidden from her father. Is this not so, Mademoiselle? Celia's eyes widened, and she nodded slowly. I had some, yes, hidden in my room. I didn't think anyone knew. Poirot clapped his hands. The final thread is tied. The lipstick, a distraction planted by Captain Drummond. The green thread, a trace of Madame Langley's greed. The scuff mark, the mark of the killer's haste. The manuscript, hidden by Madame Eleanor's love. The truth is complete. Raymond, his notebook closed, looked at his aunt. Aunt Jane, it's astonishing. Every detail, every clue, woven together. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Raymond, the human heart leaves traces, and those traces...
And when the snow clears, justice will follow. As the clock struck 5 p.m., the manor settled into a quiet acceptance, the final threads of the mystery woven into a tapestry of truth. Chapter 15. The Departure. The evening of December 24th, 1928, descended upon Danemead Manor with a stillness that seemed to honor the resolution of its grim mystery. The snow, now falling lightly, had begun to settle, and faint tracks in the distance suggested the roads might soon be passable. Inside, the drawing-room was bathed in the soft glow of lamplight, the fire crackling gently as the guests gathered one final time. The weight of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder, the recovery of the manuscript, and the exposure of Captain Hugh Drummond's guilt had left the air heavy with a mixture of relief and melancholy. Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm, her blue eyes calm but reflective. Hercule Poirot, his suit as impeccable as ever, stood near the window,
his hands clasped, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Raymond West, his notebook, now a complete record of the Manor's drama, sat beside his aunt, his face a blend of awe and introspection. The guests, their emotions raw from the ordeal, sat in subdued silence. Lady Eleanor and Celia Ashford held hands, their grief softened by the truth, though their eyes still glistened with tears. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, her earlier sharpness dulled, sat apart from her husband, Dr. Maurice Langley, whose nervous tic had subsided, replaced by a weary resignation. Victor Crane, his notebook tucked away, looked relieved to be free of suspicion, while Miss Clara Henshaw, her pince-nez glinting, sipped her tea, her scholarly zeal tempered by the tragedy. Captain Drummond, still cuffed and under Parsons' watchful eye, sat in a corner, his head bowed, his confession a heavy burden. Poirot broke the silence, his voice steady and authoritative. Mesdames et messieurs, the case of Sir Reginald Ashford's murder is closed. The manuscript is found, the killer revealed, the motives laid bare. The little grey cells, they have done their work, and with Mademoiselle Marple's insight into the human heart, we have brought order to chaos. Miss Marple's needles paused, her smile faint but warm. Mr. Poirot, in St. Mary Mead, I have seen many hearts laid bare, by love, by greed, by fear. Here we have seen all three, and though the truth is painful, it is necessary. The manuscript's secrets, Captain Drummond's act, Lady Eleanor's protection, they are all part of the human story. Raymond, closing his notebook, looked at his aunt. Aunt Jane, this feels like one of your village tales, but on a grander scale. Every clue, every motive.
Carefully. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. Précisément, Mademoiselle Marple, the lipstick on the glass, planted by Capitaine Drummond to mislead. The green thread from Madame Langley's shawl, marking her greed. The scuff mark from the captain's boots, revealing his haste. The manuscript hidden by Madame Eleanor's love. These were the threads of truth. Lady Eleanor, her voice trembling, spoke softly. Mr. Poirot, Miss Marple, I cannot thank you enough. The truth about Reginald's death, it's a wound, but it's one we can begin to heal. Celia and I will carry on, somehow. Celia, her eyes red but resolute, nodded. I loved Hugh, but I loved father too. I'll never understand why it came to this, but I'm grateful to know. Captain Drummond looked up, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, Celia. I thought I was protecting you, but I destroyed everything. I'll face what's coming. Mrs. Langley, her tone subdued, added, I was foolish, thinking I could take the manuscript and solve our problems. Maurice, I didn't mean to drag you into this. Dr. Langley sighed, his cigarette unlit in his hand. Beatrice, we've both made mistakes. Perhaps now we can start again. Victor Crane, his relief evident, spoke quietly. I only wanted to broker a deal. I should never have hidden that page. It was a coward's choice. Miss Henshaw adjusted her pince-nez, her voice soft. The manuscript's secrets were a burden Sir Reginald carried alone. I wish I'd never known them. Poirot raised a hand, his expression solemn. Each of you has played a part in this tragedy, but the guilt lies with one. Capitaine Drummond, you acted in a moment of passion, but the law, it will judge you. When the snow clears, the constable will come, and justice will follow. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes kind but firm. In St. Mary Mead I have seen justice served, not with vengeance but with understanding. Captain Drummond, your heart led you astray, but your confession has set it right, in part. As the clock struck 7 p.m., Parsons entered, his stoic demeanour softened by the moment.
Sir, madam, the snow is easing. The constable may reach us by morning. Poirot bowed slightly. Merci, Parsons. Then our time here draws to a close. Mademoiselle Marple, Monsieur West, I shall depart when the roads are clear. The little grey cells, they need rest. Miss Marple smiled, folding her knitting. And I shall return to St. Mary Mead, where the puzzles are simpler, but no less human. Mr. Poirot, it has been a privilege to work with you. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The privilege, mademoiselle, is mine. Your wisdom.
Farewells, quiet but heartfelt. Lady Eleanor and Celia retreated to their rooms, their bond strengthened by shared loss. The Langleys exchanged a tentative glance, a flicker of reconciliation in their eyes. Crane and Miss Henshaw left in silence, their roles in the drama secondary but indelible. Drummond remained under Parsons' guard, his fate awaiting the law. As the manor settled into the night, Miss Marple and Poirot stood in the hall, the snow outside a final veil over the tragedy. "Mr. Poirot," Miss Marple said, "the human heart is a puzzle, but it is one we can solve if we look with care." Poirot bowed deeply. "And with method, mademoiselle. Adieu, until another puzzle calls." With that, they parted. Miss Marple to her room, Poirot to his, each carrying the weight of a mystery solved and the promise of a quieter tomorrow. The snow fell softly, a gentle curtain closing on the drama of Dane Mead Manor.